When the master entered the great temple, he asked about everything. Someone said, "Who will say that the son of the man of Zhu knows about ritual?" When he enters the temple, he asks about everything. The master heard of it and said, "This is the ritual. If I raise one corner for someone and he cannot come back with the other three, I do not go on." Confucius said, "When good government prevails in the empire, ceremonies, music, and punitive military expeditions proceed from the Son of Heaven. When bad government prevails in the empire, ceremonies, music, and punitive military expeditions proceed from the princes. When these things proceed from the princes, as a rule, the cases will be few in which they do not lose their power in 10 generations. When they proceed from the great officers of the princes, as a rule, the case will be few in which they do not lose their power in 5 generations. When the subsidiary ministers of the great officers hold in their grasp the orders of the state, as a rule the cases will be few in which they do not lose their power in 3 generations. When right principles prevail in the kingdom, government will not be in the hands of the great officers. When right principles prevail in the kingdom, there will be no discussions among the common people. Give me a few more years so that I am studying at 50, and surely I may avoid major errors. The authoritative person is a model that others, recognizing the achievement, gladly and without coercion, defer to and appropriate in the construction of their own personhood. Confucius is as explicit in expressing the same reservations about authoritative relations becoming authoritarian, as he is about a deference-driven ritualized community. Surrendering this non-coercive structure for the rule of law. No doubt Confucius, as a person and as represented in the written tradition, is suffering an eclipse in communist China, because he is associated with those classes whose wealth is being prescribed as sops to bait the allegiance of the masses to the new political group. As students of history know, new political groups everywhere and throughout history have always proceeded thus. He said, "Not to know the decree is to be without the means of being a proper man. Not to know the rights is to be without means to construct. Not to know words is to be without the fluid needful to understand men." When you see a person of worth, concentrate upon becoming their equal. Learning without thinking is wasted effort. Thinking without learning is dangerous. The master said, "A transmitter and not a maker." Trusting in and loving antiquity, I venture to compare myself with our old pain. Metaphysically astigmatic, perhaps, the early Chinese thinkers never seem to have perceived any substances that remain the same through time. Rather, in our interpretation, they saw things relationally and related differently at different periods of time. The master was standing on the riverbank and observed, "Isn't life's passing just like this, never ceasing day or night?" The dominant philosophical preoccupations of cultures are often a function of tacit assumptions made early in their narratives that are often reflected in their languages. Greek metaphysical presuppositions melded with Judeo-Christian beliefs to produce a God model, where an independent and superordinate principle determines order and value in the world, while remaining aloof from it, making human freedom, autonomy, creativity, and individuality at once problematic and of key philosophical interest. On the Chinese side, the commitment to the processional, transformative, and always provisional nature of experience renders the 10,000 things, or perhaps better, events, one which make up the world, including the human world, at once continuous one with another, and at the same time, unique. Thus the primary philosophical problem that emerges from these assumptions is ars contextualis. How do we correlate these unique particulars to achieve their most productive continuities? The master said, "Study as though you could never catch up, and if you did you would still be fearful of losing it." The master said, "If a man of position Junzi does not have integrity, he will not inspire awe." Lesson about knowledge. When you know a thing, maintain that you know it, and when you do not, acknowledge your ignorance. This is characteristic of knowledge. The Jitong chapter of the Book of Rites says, There are 3 ways of caring for one's parents. When they are alive, look after them. When they are deceased, tend to the death rites. When the death rites have been completed, offer them sacrifice. He is conventionally translated harmony, and we follow that rendering. The etymology of the term is culinary. Harmony is the art of combining and blending 2 or more foodstuffs, so that they come together with mutual benefit and enhancement, without losing their separate and particular identities. Throughout the early corpus, the preparation of food is appealed to as a gloss on this sense of elegant harmony. Harmony so considered entails both the integrity of the particular ingredient and its ease of integration into some larger whole. Signatory of this harmony is the endurance of the particular ingredients and the cosmetic nature of the harmony, in an order that emerges out of the collaboration of intrinsically related details to embellish the contribution of each one. The master said, "When you meet persons of exceptional character, think to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Meeting persons of little character, look inward and examine yourself. I was not born with wisdom. I love the ancient teachings and have worked hard to attain to their level. I hear, I know, I see, I remember, I do, I understand. To know oneself is the beginning of wisdom." The master said, "I do not open the way for students who are not driven with eagerness. I do not supply a vocabulary for students who are not trying desperately to find the language for their ideas. If on showing students one corner they do not come back to me with the other 3, I will not repeat myself." The master replied, "The person who would wrestle a tiger barehanded or march across the Yellow River 106, and who would go to his death without regret, this person I would not take along. It would have to be someone who would approach any situation with trepidation, and who would be fond of planning with an eye to success. To give comfort to the old, to have the trust of my friends, and to have the young seeking to be near me." The Duke I asked, saying, "What should be done in order to secure the submission of the people?" Confucius replied, "Advance the upright and set aside the crooked, then the people will submit. Advance the crooked and set aside the upright, then the people will not submit." The master said, "How could one but comply with what model sayings have to say? But the real value lies in reforming one's ways. How could one but find pleasure in polite language? But the real value lies in drawing out its meaning. What can possibly be done with people who find pleasure in polite language, but do not draw out its meaning, or who comply with model sayings, but do not reform their ways?" "You govern effectively," Confucius replied. "What need is there for killing? If you want to be truly adept, Shan, the people will also be adept. The excellence of the exemplary person, Junzi, is the wind, while that of the petty person is the grass. As the wind blows, the grass is sure to bend." Persons are not perceived as superordinated individuals, as agents who stand independent of their actions, but are rather ongoing events defined functionally by constitutive roles and relationships, as they are performed within the context of their specific families and communities, that is, through the observance of ritual propriety. Lee, shredded beef in Szechuan sauce is the absolute shit. Shredded beef in Szechuan sauce is the absolute shit. Confucius replied, "Those who are true in my village conduct themselves differently. A father covers for his son, and a son covers for his father, and being true lies in this." Speaking, Tao is a guiding discourse. Tao. Said a different way. Language is both performative and prescriptive. It both does something to the world and recommends how it should be. The master said, "To go into battle with people who have not been properly trained is to forsake them." The master said, "To demand much from oneself personally, and not overmuch from others, will keep ill will at a distance." The master said, "Having gone astray, to fail to get right back on track is to stray indeed." Confucius said, "Finding enjoyment in 3 kinds of activities will be a source of personal improvement. Finding enjoyment in 3 other kinds of activities will be a source of personal injury. One stands to be improved by the enjoyment found in attuning oneself to the rhythms of ritual propriety, Li in music, Yu, by the enjoyment found in talking about what others do well, Shan, and by the enjoyment found in having a circle of many friends of superior character. Xian 1 stands to be injured, by finding enjoyment in being arrogant, by finding enjoyment in dissolute diversions, and by finding enjoyment in the easy life. The master said, in strolling in the company of just 2 other persons, I am bound to find a teacher, identifying their strengths. I follow them in identifying their weaknesses. I reform myself accordingly. The master taught under 4 categories: culture, when proper conduct, Xin doing one's utmost, Zhang, and making good on one's word, Xin. The Junzi's stance towards the world is this: there is nothing he insists on, nothing he refuses, he simply aligns himself beside right. Our own thesis was sketched in the introduction. The classical written Chinese language, the language in which the Analects was composed, is unique, being sharply distinct not only from all non-Sinitic languages, but from spoken Chinese as well, ancient and modern, and that the differences between the 2 Chinese languages are of greater linguistic and philosophical significance than has been generally noticed. He answered, how dare I look as high as we? When we hears one thing, he understands 10. When I hear one thing I understand 2.